Rick Santella here with the big breaking news of the morning, the big July jobs report. Non-farm payrolls up 73,000. Definitely a bit light, but maybe it's the Goldilocks. We'll have to see how the market moves. 73,000, that would be the lightest rate of the year. You have to go back to October of last year to find a lower non-farm pay at 44,000. Now, the revisions, here's a biggie. The 2-month revision, minus 258,000. That is a biggie.
A few moments later.
Folks, let's go down to Washington, D.C. Megan Casella, pretty big headline happening right now.
Absolutely, Brian. We're just hearing from President Trump via Truth Social that he is firing the Commissioner of Labor Statistics. He says effective immediately. This, of course, coming after the jobs report this morning.
I believe the numbers were phony, just like they were before the election. And there were other times. So you know what I did? I fired her. Right. And you know what? I did the right thing.
If any government official going forward is presenting data or information you don't like, should they fear for their job?
I've always had a problem with these numbers. You know, I was thinking about it this morning. Before the numbers that came out, I said, who is the person that does these numbers? And then they gave me stats about before the election. I had a similar problem. I mean, she gave out numbers that were so good for the Democrats. It was like unbelievable. And then right after the election, she corrected those numbers with, I think, almost 900,000 corrections. I think nobody had ever seen anything like it. Well, today she did the same thing with the 253,000, whatever the number was. No, we need people that we can trust.
Well, I do have a question for you, sir. It is related to this.
You hit Mark Warner with exactly the right question.
Well, I'd like to ask it of you as well. We either assume that the data is manipulated, in which case I'm curious as to whether you personally have seen evidence of it. But if it is manipulated, and actually we have a stronger labor market than the data suggests, why would the Fed need to cut interest rates?
All right. Today's Monday, the 4th of August. This is a macro discussion about the jobs report that we got on Friday. You see, in this environment that we got, with the political divide and everybody have their heads up their asses, there is a lot of bullshit about the jobs number that we got on Friday. There are folks who are saying this is the end of the world, the economy is collapsing. Others are saying, no, the economy is doing great, and the Bureau is just faking the numbers for political reasons. And there's a lot of confusion because now that we have a weaker jobs number, at least on paper, doesn't that solve the dilemma that the White House has been upset about, which is the Federal Reserve not cutting rates? Well, we got a weaker jobs data. That's the excuse for the Fed to cut rates, at least on paper. At the same time, the White House is upset about the weaker data, as in they want stronger jobs data, and they also want the Federal Reserve to cut rates. The cake and eating it too. So folks, in this video, we're going to have an objective look. We're going to look at the facts and only the facts. Why was this job number weak? And does it really merit the Federal Reserve to cut rates? Because last week we got Federal Reserve Chairman Powell coming out with the conference, and he said that the jobs data looks pretty good. I don't see a reason why I should be cutting rates, specifically when I have an inflation risk coming from the tariffs. Matter of fact, Chair Powell actually hinted that maybe he's gonna raise rates and not cut them because of this inflation risk. And now after this jobs data, here's the headline for you. Did the Fed just royally screw up? Question mark. Well, we're going to answer using the facts and the data only. No bullshit. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. And here it is, in focus tonight. Game changer. That's what they told us. So that job number that we got on Friday, it's a game changer. It's going to force the Fed to cut rates, and they're too late. Too late, pal. One step at a time, folks. Here's what happened. Friday, we got the jobs number. The estimate was that the economy created 104,000 jobs in the month of July. The actual number was 73,000, so we're a little bit short here from the estimate. The unemployment rate came out at 4.2%, that is matching the estimate, and the same goes for average hourly earnings year on year. The estimate was 3.8%. We got a little bit of inflation on top of that, 3.9%, no biggie. The problem is that we came up short in the jobs estimate, 104 versus 73,000. When we look at the details in which sectors we've seen job growth or lack thereof, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that we've been talking about that this economy is dominated via, one, the AI spending by the big cap technology companies among each other, of course. Doesn't really create any value for us, except pumping the stock market in a bubble. But the other thing that keeps the economy afloat is the aging population. They need a lot of health care. We have a shortage of jobs, believe it or not, so the majority of the job creation in the economy is happening in healthcare. Of course, you know what happened earlier in the year with the passage of the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which includes billions and billions of dollars of Medicaid cuts that could impact the pace of job creation in healthcare negatively down the road, but not right now. When we look at the details of this jobs number, no surprise to anybody here, we see private education and health services leading job creation in the economy by 79,000 jobs. We also got additions in financial activities, trade, transportation, and utilities, leisure and hospitality, even though the pace of job creation in that sector is slowing down dramatically. We have construction, other services, but we lost some jobs, mainly 14,000 jobs in professional and business services. We have lost 11,000 jobs in manufacturing. Now, of course, the White House is doing all of this tariff war with the alleged goal that we need to bring manufacturing back here. That's not working so far. And we lost about 10,000 jobs in government, 4,000 in mining and lodging, 2,000 jobs in information. Now, this is a weaker jobs report than expectations, but it's not a weak jobs report. We're not losing, net, we're not losing jobs in this economy. So what is the big deal? The big deal is the revisions. So if you look at this chart right here, in light brown, that's the estimate. And then I guess in actual brown, that's the correction. That's the real number. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics, also known as the kitchen in this channel, is well known of cooking the data for years now. It's not just this year. They've been cooking the data for years. They give you good job numbers and then they revise them down. They give you the impression that the economy is doing great. And then months later, when nobody's paying attention, they revise everything down. And you got to wonder, what is the reality in this economy? Is it really a good economy, or are we in a shadow recession, as I've been arguing in this channel for too long? But you can see that these revisions in the month of May and June are bigger than usual. They're huge, and they change the picture. If you got an impression that the economy created over 100,000 jobs in the month of May and June, and you got an impression that the economy is doing okay, well, they shaved off the majority of these jobs. They say, no, we only created a small fraction of the jobs we told you the economy created back in May and June. That's the problem. Now, even with the revisions, let's look at the trend as you see it right here. We got 73,000 jobs in July. Let's see how that's going to be revised. But all in all, we don't see any period of job losses in the economy. Sure, the latest revisions are going to screw up the trend. So you see the trend here is supposed to go to about 800,000 jobs by the month of July. Now with the revisions, we're back to 600,000 jobs. Again, major disappointment, major slowdown, but we're not at a crisis level here in the jobs market. Now we have to be careful, of course, because the jobs market unemployment rate can spike up dramatically, as we've seen back in the recession in 2008, 2009. So what I like to look at is the year-on-year jobs growth per month. And when you look at the trend right here, going all the way back to 2024, all the way to July 2025, is the trend slowing down? Sure. We already know that the pace of job creation has slowed down. It is harder right now to find jobs. It is harder to switch to new jobs, but we are still gaining jobs year on year by about 1%. If we compare the trend that we got for 2025 with the trend that we have from 2008 when we actually got a recession, it's not even close. The trend right now, while it is trending down, is a lot healthier than what we've seen back in 2008 when the economy was actually losing jobs. Now, if you want to pin it against 2007, in orange, of course, you got 2025. In blue, you got 2007. Sure, we're slower than 2007, but we're not at 2008 pace of job creation year on year. Slow down, a little bit of concern, sure. But crisis requires the Federal Reserve to cut rates by 50, 75 basis points? Absolutely not. Most importantly, when you dig down in the details, you want to investigate the source of these massive job revisions for May and June. When you do the investigation, you realize that, wait a minute here, there is absolutely no reason for the Fed to cut rates. Why? Because here it is. When you look at the June revisions, all sectors were revised down. As you can see, the white column, that's the OG estimate, and then you got the revisions in the red column, which indicates that the revision is lower than the initial estimate. But how bad is it? Let's dig down here and see which sectors saw the majority of the job revisions. As you can see, all sectors in the month of June after the revision came out short than initially reported. But the majority of the revisions happened in the government sector of the economy. Now, a lot of folks would say, yeah, that's all about Doge. Not really. If we dig even deeper on the details of this government revisions that we got for the month of June, federal government got cut by about 3,000 jobs, but the majority of the reduction of the initial estimate happened in state and local government. About 55,000 jobs were overestimated in state. About 61,000 jobs were overestimated in local in the initial report of June. And that's what they corrected when they released the data for July. What the Bureau is saying is we've overestimated the jobs created in the government sector, specifically state and local, in the month of June. And now we're correcting that. And if you remember, when we covered the June report, I told you that something doesn't add up here, because we've seen thousands and thousands of jobs created in the education sector and state and local governments. We're talking about tens of thousands of jobs. And now we got the summer season, schools are off. Where are these jobs coming from? There was a lot of doubt about the accuracy of the estimate in June. Here's one headline that says the jobs report shows local government going on a hiring spree. Did they? It turns out there was not a surge in hiring. Instead, seasonal adjustment to the data meant to account for school getting out may have distorted the numbers in June. So even before the revisions from the Bureau, we already knew that the number from June was bullshit. But mind you, the White House didn't really have any problem with it. The White House took all of these positive revisions from the month of June when they gave us revisions for May and April, and then they showed a massive job creation in the month of June by overestimating state and local jobs. The White House came out saying that this is the June boom. The jobs report shows the economy continues to soar under President Trump. So he didn't have any problem with the Bureau making a mistake in his favor by cooking the jobs by overestimating the job creation in state and local government. Now he has a problem because they corrected the mistake. Okay, let's dig into the month of May, the revisions. Again, in white, you see the initial estimate, and then you see in the red or green column the revisions. The majority of sectors got negative revisions, but we got utilities, information, and business and professional services got positive revisions. And you dig down to the sectors, you're not seeing big revisions as we see in the month of June in the government sector. Yeah, we see about 32,000 jobs revised down in health and education and in leisure and hospitality, but no biggie here. Just a little bit of revision, which the Bureau been doing for years now. So with that understanding, ladies and gentlemen, would you now know that the majority of the negative revisions we got would upset the White House, would upset the market, is pretty much just correcting a mistake of overestimating state and local jobs that were reported in the month of June. That's about it. Is this a reason for the Fed to cut rates? I don't think so. On top of that, you might say, but Mav, sure, I got you. Okay, the majority of the job revisions, the negative job revisions that we got on Friday, were pretty much correcting the overestimation of state and local government jobs when the June report came out. Got it. But you cannot deny the weakness and the slowdown of the pace of job creation that we see in leisure and hospitality and other sectors. I hear you. But that could also be due to the immigration policies by this administration. You see the jobs created for foreign-born workers down about 1 million in the year 2025 so far. So a lot of the slowdown in the jobs created in the economy could be a result of the immigration policies. So we go back to the question that we started this program with. The headline, did the Fed just royally screw up? Question mark. You tell me, is it a valid reason for the Federal Reserve to cut rates because the Bureau corrected an overestimation in state and local government jobs and perhaps a reduction in foreign-born jobs because of the immigration policies? When you have the tariff threat that could increase inflation, if you're the Fed chairman right now, would you do it? And the answer is, if you're reasonable, no. There is no reason. The stock market is close to being at all-time highs. Prices of homes, of assets, pretty much still at all-time highs. And the weakness that we see in the jobs market is pretty much corrections of overestimation of state and local jobs. And by the way, result of the immigration policies. My 2 cents is, no, the Federal Reserve should not cut rates. Because when you cut rates right now without knowing and seeing how the tariffs will impact inflation in the economy, you're taking a major risk that could exacerbate inflation in the economy. And then we have a phenomenon of stagflation. Because the truth is, the jobs market is slowing down and will continue to slow down. You don't want to add more gas and fire here by reviving inflation higher on top of the tariff, by loosening the policy prematurely, as the Federal Reserve Chairman. Now, folks, we're not saying that the economy is great and doing wonderful. There are signs of worries, but we're not at the point, given the balance of risk, when you consider the risk of inflation, we're not at the point where it merits the Fed to cut rates. But we see weakness in the jobs market. For example, if you look at the 6-month pace, the majority of the jobs created in the economy are once again in private and health services. The other sectors that are supposed to be producing massive amount of jobs, they're really not. When you dig down, the majority of jobs created in the economy by the healthcare sector happen to be in social assistance, specifically individual and family services. We talked about the aging population. You see the shortage. I know it here in Las Vegas, Nevada, for example. Lots of seniors moving in here, and there are no resources. You got shortages of nursing homes, of care facilities, of social workers and nurses. So that's what's keeping the job creation in the economy alive. But besides that, the rest of the economy is weak in job creation. Yet it's still not at the point where it merits the Fed to begin cutting rates like it's an emergency. There's another important caveat here. It ain't just the revisions, correction of mistakes by the Bureau, and the immigration policies contributing to weaker jobs data. It is also AI. And if we see job reduction in the economy because of AI, is that really indicative of weakness in the economy? Does that really merit the Federal Reserve Chairman to cut rates because AI is eliminating jobs? There's a big difference when we see companies not doing so good and they have to reduce headcount to save themselves because they're losing money. And another, when you have companies cutting jobs not because they have weakness or they see bad financial results, but rather from an efficiency standpoint. Because AI can do the job. We don't need the headcount. We don't need to spend money. We want to increase the margins. You see that evident, by the way. When you look at the job trends for the past 6 months, we've lost thousands of jobs in computer systems design and related services. A lot of that could be attributed to AI. Furthermore, when you dig down, administrative and support services, we've lost tens of thousands of jobs. I think that's also related to AI. Dig further in the information sector of the economy. You can see that computing infrastructure providers, data processing, web hosting, and related services, we've also lost thousands of jobs. So context really matter, folks. Yeah, we got a shocking jobs data, and we have a weakening jobs market, but the majority of the weakness coming from revisions, immigration policies, and AI. It's not from inherent weakness in the economy. Are there warning signs? Sure. Are they flashing red right now? Who knows? The dynamic of the economy today is different than 10, 20 years ago. And maybe we cannot rely on the jobs data, looking at the headline numbers, and make economic policies based on that. Maybe we have to dig down into the details and assess the risk. For example, if you want to argue that we have a weaker jobs market and we have warning signs for the economy, maybe it's going to merit the Federal Reserve to cut rates down the road. Sure, I mean, you look at people not in the workforce, but want a job. That trend is moving higher. And every time that happens, as you can see in the chart right here, that's a leading indicator that we're dipping into a recession. Another warning sign. If you look at unemployed, 27 weeks or longer as percent of total unemployed. If that trend is heading higher, then that's the beginning stages of a recession. So we see it happening right now as we've seen it back in 2007. There are warning signs. And furthermore, when you look at the compensation growth, the trend is down, which means that employees are not competitive anymore. They can't have choices. They can't switch jobs or demand higher wages. That's going to impact the consumer negatively in the economy, especially if we have a revival in inflation. We all know about the resumption of student loan payments. That's going to add thousands of dollars in spending obligation for the consumer to pay back their debt. That means they're going to spend on the economy because they have to use the money to pay back the debt. All of these are warning signs. Are they enough for the Fed to cut rates. I told you my 2 cents. I see the warning signs, but I don't see the urgency of cutting rates right now when you consider the risk of inflation and the tariffs. But you let me know what you think in the comment section. At the end of the day, this is the result that we got Friday. The Trump administration decided to fire the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They did not like the numbers, and the commissioner got fired, which is kind of weird because the Trump administration been barking left and right that the Federal Reserve is not cutting rates and it's an obstacle to the economy. Everything's doing great, but too late Powell is not cutting rates. You shouldn't mind the weaker jobs data. You should actually be happy that we got that because now the market is pricing in rate cuts in September. But go figure, like I said, the administration wants its cake and eat it too. They want stronger jobs numbers and they also want the Fed to cut rates. And they don't want inflation either. I'm sorry, but it doesn't work that way. Something gotta give. But from now on, Kevin Hassett came out today and said that the administration wants to replace the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics with an ally. That Trump wants allies to give him the jobs data. In other words, anybody who's gonna assume the job, they better get the memo that they have to produce good numbers. And if there's any bad numbers coming from the jobs market, they have to mask it. In other words, if you had lack of faith in the numbers that we get from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, aka the kitchen, now it's getting worse. Now we have zero faith. Because right now, everything's going to be manipulated. And by the way, the Bureau produces inflation data too. So now we can no longer rely on the government data when it comes to jobs and inflation. And this is a colossal mistake by the administration, not just because it sounds or has the appearance of authoritarianism, Kim Jong-un kind of policies, things we've seen in Turkey with Erdogan, of course, laying off, firing the head of the central bank because he didn't like the policy. These are not things that we see in America, but it's not just that. The question now becomes, if Trump wants to manipulate the numbers higher, wouldn't that go against his desire for the Fed to cut rates? I mean, Jay Powell, assuming he stays in power until his tenure is over next year, suppose in September we get a jobs number, cooked, no cooked, we're never going to know. The Trump Bureau of Labor Statistics might beat Bobby Filet. Add new flavors now. And they might give us that, the job market is actually booming. What do you think Powell is going to do? He's probably not going to cut rates. And for all we know, maybe we do have weakness in the jobs market, but it's being hidden by the Fugazi data. That's the danger that we're in right now. You can't really make policy. You can't really trust any data. So what do? We trust the realities on the ground. For example, we got an AP poll today. And when you ask Americans, which are the following are major source of stress in their lives right now, the majority of Americans, 86%, say that the cost of groceries is either a major or a minor source of stress right now. 53% say a major source, the majority. But that's not indicative of inflation being defeated. That's not indicative of a healthy economy when budgets cannot even afford groceries. And the other thing that we're doing in this channel is we're looking at the corporate data. We're looking at corporate earnings. We're extracting themes to make conclusions about the economy. For example, last week, and I produced that video publicly, we extracted certain macro themes from the earnings reports that we got from companies like Alphabet, Delta Airlines, Hilton, GM, Chipotle. And we show you the good and the bad. And we've done that this weekend. We looked at the newer batch of earnings that we got. We came out with certain conclusions. We're going to continue to do this series. Now, look at all of these corporate earnings and then make a conclusion. What do they say about the economy? What kind of themes are we seeing in the economy? That's going to give you a better understanding than the insane fluctuation in the government data, which we cannot trust anymore. So folks, join us as a member of this channel here to access all of these videos and stay ahead of the rest by knowing what's going on in the economy, by looking at the actual facts, the data, corporate earnings, the stuff that really matters. Before we wrap up, folks, if you happen to be a member in the channel, we've produced a market coverage video earlier today because the market right now, the reaction that we got today at least, it seems that the market says, you know what, maybe we're going to get away with a rate cut. Maybe the realities of the jobs data don't really merit a rate cut, but we're going to get one either way in September. And that's why the market was upset Friday. Now it's happy Monday. We'll see what it's going to do tomorrow. And of course, we're going to cover all of it here, folks. So once again, thank you for joining us in this video. I hope you found some benefit in it. And if you did, please return the favor by pressing the like button, leaving us a nice comment in the section below, and subscribing to the channel. Better yet, consider becoming a Maverick member by joining us using the links in the description here on YouTube or on Patreon to access all of the videos. But this is all I got for you for now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I appreciate and love all of you. I'll be talking to you again tomorrow. Good night.
How many of you right now work 2 jobs just to have enough money to be broke? That ain't right.
Sounds like my brother.
If you work 2 jobs and at the end of the week, you got just enough money to get your broke ass home, let me hear you say, that ain't right.